attached to the 8th Army, and as such, the Morris actually went into Normandy on D-Day. Now we have another iconic vehicle coming out now. It's American, but used widely by the British. That is the M3, right, it's based upon the M3 half-track. The M3 half-track was a development of the white Scout car, which was a fully wheeled vehicle. The problem with wheeled vehicles is that they don't have particularly good cross-country capability. Our poor old Morris here, although they made it a four-wheel drive version, its cross-country capability is, as I said before, pretty dire. The Americans wanted to improve the cross-country capability of their Scout cars by adding on the back a French-designed track system, which they borrowed off the French there. They produced what initially was an armoured personnel carrier. Now you may wonder, we're in a tank museum, and so far we've seen a Jeep and we've seen a light reconnaissance vehicle. Now I'm talking about an armoured personnel carrier. It's important to remember that tanks require infantry and infantry require tanks. If you're an infantryman in a slit trench, the last thing you want to hear coming towards you is that growl of the diesel engine and the squeak of the track pins as the tanks come towards you. If you're a tanky, the last thing you want is an infantryman lurking in the shrubbery with a shoulder-launched anti-tank missile. Now, we're talking about British vehicles in the Second World War, so if you imagine sort of German soldiers lurking in the shrubbery with a Panzerschreck or a Panzerfaust, they need to be flushed out, and the infantry can do that to protect the tanks. The tanks give fire support to the infantry protect the tanks. Equally, tanks can take ground, but they can't actually hold it. So it's important to have infantry backing you up. In the First World War, tanks advanced at about walking speed. If you got 2 miles an hour out of a Mark IV or Mark V, you're doing pretty well. And that's about the speed that a British Tommy could manage with 35 kilos of kit on his back across no man's land. By the Second World War, tanks were much quicker. And both the Americans and the Germans realised that using lorries to try and keep up with the tanks, to keep that infantry up with the tanks, wasn't going to work. So they both adopted half-tracks. Now, the M3 is not dissimilar from the German version, the German Hanomag. They were both of them open-topped, which was a problem. It makes them vulnerable to things like mortar fire. And the M3 is also relatively vulnerable to things like mines. But nevertheless, it was used widely, again, by every one of the Allied forces during the Second World War. And in fact, the M3 half-track was used as late as 1967 by the Israeli Defense Force during the Six-Day War, and is still in use with armies around the world even today. Our version is the M16. So basically you have the basic M3, and any variant that comes after that has a different number attached to it. The Americans love doing this. It makes it really complicated. It's why Churchill insisted that American-made tanks were given names rather than just numbers. So the M4 tank became the Sherman. The M3 became the Stuart or the Grant or the Lee. This is the M16. It was originally designed as an anti-aircraft vehicle. Hence, it's got a quad-mounted 50 caliber in the back there, in a powered Maxon mounting. By the time the Allies got this in action in Normandy, they had air superiority. So frankly, it wasn't much use for anti-aircraft, but if you really want to flush those snipers out of the hedgerows, the bocage, then that meat chopper, as it was known, is the way to do it. Now, I'm really pleased this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm stepping back a little bit, that we've got a unique vehicle out today. The A34 Comet. I've been waiting to see this one out here in just the same kind of way the British tankies were waiting for the Comet during the war. This is the first of the British-built tanks that was capable of taking on something like a Panther or a Tiger on equal footing. The maximum armour, for instance, on the Comet is 100mm. That's exactly the same as the maximum armour on our famous Tiger 131. The gun she's packing is a cut-down version of the 17-pounder that was fitted to the Sherman Firefly and is capable of engaging and destroying a Tiger tank at 2 kilometres away. So a very impressive bit of kit. First designed to put on the drawing board in 1943. It took over a year to get them up and running, and because of the need to get a heavy British vehicle onto the battlefield that was capable of dealing with these big German tanks, a couple of corners were cut. There were some initial criticisms about the Comet, one of which, for instance, was the fact she's still got a bound machine gun. The British clung to the use of a Czech design machine gun called a Beza, which requires a flat metal mounting to fit it. You can't fit it on sloped armour. So one of the criticisms was that by mounting the Beza on here, they couldn't slope the front armour. The other criticism was that the belly armour was a little thin, and given that the mines had become a major issue by the time the Comet was in combat, that was something which did exercise the mind. But the major criticism of the Comet was, where had it been? Where had it been throughout the war? If we'd had this in 1943, things would have been very, very different. It's an excellent bit of kit. Now, based on an existing design, the Cromwell, if you go to our tank story hall, you'll see the Cromwell there. Basically, the hull is almost the same as the Cromwell. It's got the same Christie running gear. Now, I'm going to get a bit sprockety now, I do apologise. Right, if we look at the running gear, you guys over here will see this as she comes round. The only wheel here that is powered is the toothed one, the sprocket wheel at the back. The engine takes power directly there, and that pulls the track around. The big wheels on the bottom here spread the weight of the tank, and on this particular vehicle we've got return rollers. That's the big difference. If you go and look at its parent tank, the Cromwell, the track sits down on the top of the road wheels. On this one, because it's a much heavier vehicle, weighs in at 35 tons, it's a much heavier vehicle, we need return rollers to hold that track away from the running wheels. The wheel at the front, the idler, this is the kind of Goldilocks wheel. If you have your track too tight, there's a danger that you might break it. If you have it too loose, there's a danger it might come off when you go around corners. So the idler can be adjusted backwards and forwards to adjust the tension on the track. And interestingly enough, although this old lady weighs, as I say, 35 tons, she's exerting about the same ground pressure on the arena that I am. Most armoured vehicles spread their weight out to about the ground pressure per square centimetre of an adult male. So it allows the tank to travel across soft ground, across difficult ground, and this sort of thing. 5-man crew in there: commander, gunner, loader operator, hull gunner, and driver. All right, so a very impressive bit of kit. I'm just going to get out of this way. Which were put right on its successor, which was the Centurion, and yet the Comet was a very, very capable vehicle. It was in British service in Hong Kong until 1960, so we got our money's worth out of it. Over 1,200 were built. That's almost as many as the number of Tiger 1s that were built by the Germans. Now you'll see here we've got some infantry advancing towards our M16. These guys are the Bovington Volunteers. Now, the American Army has Delta Force, British Army has 22 SAS, we have the Bovington Volunteers. Each one of these fearsome warriors has trained for at least 40 minutes in order to take part in this display this afternoon. So they're bussing into the M16. Now we get asked a lot of questions in the museum. Famously, where's the exit? It's very difficult to find. We're a bit like IKEA with armoured vehicles, really. One of the questions we get asked a lot, particularly in this display, is why is the Jeep called the Jeep? And it's one of these strange things. No one's entirely sure. Some people will tell you, oh, it stands for GP, General Purpose. Now that would work if they were all made by Ford, because the Ford designated theirs GP, but Willys Overland didn't. I prefer to adhere to the argument that it's based on a Popeye cartoon character called Eugene the Jeep, who's a small alien creature, and there seems to be evidence that name was given to anything small and unusual. So the Jeep there at the front was considered to be a little small, a little unusual, so it was nicknamed the Jeep. So there they go. Just listen to that comment for a minute, ladies and gentlemen. One of the things they missed off the comment was silencers. The engine in the back there is a Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, which is the same engine, different name, same engine that you'd find in a Spitfire. So it's basically the same as the Merlin engine in the Spitfire. And makes it very, very powerful and very, very noisy. The thinking was that by 1945, we kind of wanted them to know we were coming if we had a comet, so we didn't sort of hide our light under a bushel. If you heard that sort of fluttering of the exhaust there, you knew that something heavy was coming in your direction. Oh, we're going to get a wave now. Look, we're going to fly past. That's it, wave back. There's the poor chappy. There we are, wave as well. Look. Oh, and a toot-toot. No. There goes the meat chopper. The M16 was used in an infantry support role right the way into the Korean War because those 450 calibers do lay down an awful lot of fire on an area. Now, you've been very patient with me. I'll be talking about sprockets and things. I'm guessing quite a lot of you on holiday. I'll give you a wave if you're on holiday. Who's on holiday? Oh, well, look at this lot here. Welcome to sunny Dorset. It's always like this here. Yeah, oh, you're on holiday as well. All right, okay. In fact, though, what I'd like to do, although you're on holiday, I'd like you to suspend disbelief a little bit and maybe use your imagination. And instead of say, right, we're here on a nice sunny August day in Dorset, I'd like you to imagine that it's March 1945. The British Army has been thrown across the Rhine in an amphibious crossing, Operation Plunder, and is advancing into the heartland of Germany. Now, the war is pretty obviously almost over, but isolated units of the Wehrmacht are still dug in, resisting the Allies, fighting for every metre of the fatherland. And one of those units is coming this way now. So look out for it, you'll see it coming. And now get the youngsters in the crowd, give me a wave if you can see it. You're looking for a rather fearsome looking German vehicle. I can hear it. Here she comes. This is a Stug 3, a Sturmgeschütz 3, an assault gun. You'll notice, unlike a tank, it doesn't have a turret. That gives it a very low profile. Absolutely perfect as an ambush weapon. Originally designed back in 1939 as an infantry support weapon, the Stug 3 was in production throughout the Second World War. It was up-gunned and up-armoured throughout the war. And by the time the Allies are pushing into Germany, it's exactly the kind of weapon you need. Now you'll notice the Stug is manoeuvring into an ambush position. It's waiting for a mixed convoy of Allied troops. We've got infantry, we've got armour, we've got reconnaissance being lent out to us by the Polish armoured. Now, let's imagine that the advancing Allies have got some kind of intel that there is German armour in the area. What might they be doing now, I wonder? If you've been listening to my talk, what might they be doing? Having a cup of tea? No, that's the RAF you're thinking of. That's why we've got no fighter bombers in the air at the moment. No, they'll be sending out a reconnaissance vehicle. So our gallant Poles in their Morris light reconnaissance are going to come out. And one of the things they will be doing, if they identify the enemy, is to call down some artillery support. So they're getting away with it, coming past now, they're radioing back. Oh my goodness! Okay, that was artillery support, I think you'll agree. There we go. So under cover of that pretty impressive fusillade, the Boris is making its escape, using its power, its speed. It can manage 50 miles an hour on the road, a bit less cross-country. And having rattled the enemy, we're going to deploy the infantry and the armour. So the Stug, it's got a big old 75mm gun on there. It's a serious bit of kit. They've been badly rattled by that artillery bombardment. And to be honest, I don't think the Comet's got a great deal to worry about unless the Stug, whoa, there he goes. The Stug's got a roundaway, but he's fired too soon. A young, inexperienced crew. The Germans by this time are running out of experienced panzer crews. These guys could be just out of the Hitler Youth in all probability. They fired too soon. They've given their position away. Aha! Okay, the Comet didn't make the same mistake. Right, one shot away, that high velocity 77 has put a hole in the Stug's engine. So he's now immobile. Here comes the Comet, he's closing to cover the enemy. And here comes the M16 and the Jeep. So we're going to be deploying infantry just in case the Stug has got some shielding, Both grenadiers or whatever there. There may well be somebody there with a Panzerfaust. So the infantry is going to deploy and secure the position under the gun of the Comet. So they're debussing now. It's a rather splendid word the army used for getting out of a vehicle. You don't just get out of a vehicle, you debus from a vehicle. They're debussing now. Okay, it's a small squad rather than a section. They're coming forward in leaps. Now you'll notice they're taking care not to run in front of each other. There is no such thing as friendly fire, there's just fire. And when they get close enough, they're going to rush the Stug. There they go. Oh, blood-curdling. And that's it, the Stug crew have decided discretion's the better part of valor. Far, far better to surrender to the British or the Americans than to wait for the Russians coming the other direction. So we've secured the position. This important crossroads on the way to Munster has been secured. There goes the one of he's raising the Union flag just to make it very good. Have a cheer for the Union flag, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. Hey! There they go, look at that. Well done, son. Well done. So now they come. It'll take a moment for our gallant Bovington volunteers to embus into the M16. It's not been adopted for use by members of the public, so we're taking it a little bit carefully. We don't want anybody to injure themselves taking part in the display. If you fancy a blast around the arena in an armoured vehicle yourself, you can always turn up tomorrow and volunteer for the volunteers. Right, your ticket lasts you a year. Or when we finish this, we'll be running a fully tracked vehicle around the arena, an M548 American logistical vehicle. So that if you fancy bouncing around there, that's well worth it. A little bit extra to pay. I think you have about 1 meter 25. I think it is to get on there. For safety's sake, but that's well worth doing it. So here comes the Comet. Listen to that roar of that meter engine. Pretty impressive. Oh, and the bang of the exhausts. I think you'll agree, you're not going to sneak up on anybody in a Comet, are you? A bit of a pop and a bang there. Here comes a meat chopper. Give our volunteers a cheer, they can hear you in this one. There they are, look at that one. Gallant volunteers. Well done, guys. And here's the Jeep. There we are. The Sergeant Major gets to ride the Jeep. I think he's got a bit of a Monty complex going on there, I think. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, your ticket lasts you a year, so do come back and see us again. Each week we're trying to get different vehicles out from our historic running collection. Next week, for instance, the theme is the British in the Gulf War. So if you want to have a look at some more modern vehicles, do come along and see us again. If